As tensions rise between Iran and Israel, one important question stands out. Will Iran get help from countries like China, whereas Israel is known to have ties with Western powers, especially the US? It is still unclear whether Iran will support the current conflict. Even though Iran has good relations with China and is a member of the BRICS, it is not clear how China will react to this situation. This discussion looks at these relations and speculates on China's possible role in this worsening situation. The history of Iran and China goes back hundreds of years and has grown a lot in the last few decades. Their first interactions were peaceful, like trade along the Silk Road, which led to cultural and economic ties as early as the 7th century. These early interactions laid the groundwork for the cooperative relationship that would later grow in modern times. In the 1980s, especially during the Iran-Iraq War, the relationship between Iran and China grew a lot, even though they had to deal with international isolation and arms embargoes. When Iran needed military help, it turned to China. Chinese companies have sold jet fighters to Iran in the past, most famously in the 1980s. China gave Iran many kinds of military equipment, like fighter airplanes. Specifically, Iran got Chinese-made versions of the MiG-19 called the Shenyang J-6 and the Chengdu F-67, which is a variant of the MiG-21. These planes improved Iran's air power during a time when it was cut off from the rest of the world. China also gave Iran a lot of weapons, like tanks, fighter planes, and missiles, which were very important for its war efforts. This time was the start of practical teamwork that has grown over the last 40 years. Both economic and strategic reasons led China to sell weapons to Iran during the war. For example, the sales gave China hard currency, which helped its efforts to modernize its economy. By supporting Iran strategically, China was able to balance out Soviet and Western influence in the Middle East by 1987. It was thought that China had sold about $7.5 billion worth of arms to Iran and Iraq since 1981, which is about 75% of all the weapons that China had exported. The partnership has grown into a defined strategic alliance in recent years. It was strengthened during Chinese President Xi Jinping's 2016 visit to Iran, where a 25-year cooperation deal was signed. This partnership has important economic, political, and military effects for China. Iran is a very important energy source for the world and a key part of the Belt and Road Initiative for Iran. Support from China opens up business possibilities and lessens the effects of Western bans. Recently, there have been rumors that Iran has been in secret talks with China and Russia to get ammonium perlorate, which is a key ingredient for solid rocket fuel used in ballistic missiles. These deals would be against UN sanctions, and they have caused concern about Iran's possible missile capabilities. In March 2024, Iran, China and Russia held a naval practice together in the Gulf of Oman called Maritime Security Belt 2024. It was their fourth joint drill since 2019, and the goal was to improve maritime security and cooperation in the region. More than 20 ships, support vehicles, battle boats, and naval planes from the countries that took part in the drill. Russia sent the versatile cruiser drills, and China sent the guided missile destroyer Arashi and the ship Liyi. The drills were meant to make trade safer, getting rid of terrorists and hacking, helping relief work and making it easier for people to share information and run rescue missions. Azerbaijani watches Russia, Kazakhstan, Andorra, Pakistan and South Africa took part in the practice in October 2024. Iran said it would hold military drills with Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea. This plan is a big step forward for relations between the two countries because it will be the first time they work together on something like this. These changes show that Iran is still working to improve its military cooperation with both global and regional partners as part of a larger plan to strengthen its defense and gain more power in the region. The way China deals with Iran shows a bigger strategic problem. The government of China often agrees with Iran's view of the world. Iran joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is run by China and Russia and deals with economic and security problems in Eurasia. In January, Iran joined BRICS, a move by China and Russia to counter Western power. Allow us to pause for a moment. Could you save us some time? Please hit the like button if you like our content and leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your participation helps us grow. Thank you. A big part of China's business links with Iran in 2023 is that China needs Iranian oil. China bought an average of 1.1 million barrels of oil from Iran every day, which is about 10% of its total crude oil sales. This is a 70% rise from the previous year because Iran was offering lower prices because of the sanctions. A lot of this oil goes to Chinese teapots or independent refiners that don't have many ties to the US financial system. This makes them less likely to be hit by sanctions. In some months of 2023, Iran's lower oil prices helped these refiners. Rose to as high as 1.5 million barrels per day, which is the highest level of oil trade between China and Iran in the last 10 years. Iran's important part in China's energy security is shown by the fact that about 90% of its oil supplies go to China. Despite sanctions, Iranian oil is a safer and more cheap option than oil from Russia and Saudi Arabia, which both have to deal with similar global problems. China has kept up its high amounts of oil imports from Iran by doing things like ship-to-ship swaps and making oil look like it comes from other places, like Malaysia, since it is the biggest oil buyer in the world. Conflict in the Middle East worries China because it could affect the price and supply of oil. Iran offers cheaper oil, and an Israeli attack on Iran's oil infrastructure could make China rely more on more expensive sources like Saudi Arabia. Besides that, if Iran or its friends like the Houthis and Yemen key sea lanes like the Strait of Hormuz or the Red Sea could be attacked, threatening oil supplies from Saudi Arabia. However, China has enough oil stockpiles to cover a few months of lost supply. Imports a big fight could still have an effect on China's economy. A lot of money from China has been put into energy and building projects in the Middle East, mostly in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and even Israel. China thinks that less American power in the Middle East is a good thing, so it has built ties with rivals like Saudi Arabia. These investments are a part of China's Belt and Road Plan, which aims to boost trade and make China look like a more stable world power globally. China wants to partner with countries in the global south that see it as an option to the United States. Dominance, but as tensions rise in the Middle East, with Iran, a key Chinese ally, at the heart, it might be easier to see China's political limits. China has tried to show its power in the area by, for example, helping to make a diplomatic deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia in March and pushing for a peace deal between Fatah and Hamas in July. However, fighting has continued. Israel did not accept Beijing's statement that it would not include Hamas in the government of the Palestinian territories. China's trade ties with Iran give it some power. Beijing seems to want us to get involved in other global wars instead of getting involved in Iran. Israel is in a direct fight with the US, which is already under a lot of stress from problems in Ukraine and the Middle East. China might see this as a benefit that keeps Americans from each other. Focus from problems like Taiwan in the South China Sea. Despite this, China doesn't want to add to the conflict. Its military partnership with Iran is limited and doesn't lead to many results. The 2021 military cooperation deal called for some small joint drills. There was also talk of China investing $400 billion in Iran over 25 years, but Beijing seems hesitant to make big promises. China focuses on building strategic ties with countries like Russia and North Korea, which share borders with China and protect it from US influence. However, China is careful in these relationships. For example, it supports Russia's defense industry but doesn't send weapons to the Ukraine conflict and tries to stop North Korea from making nuclear threats. China did not stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, but it is unhappy with its military deal with Russia as violence in the Middle East rises. In early October, China doesn't want things to get worse. Israel has hit Iranian-backed groups in Gaza and Lebanon with rockets. Iran has also fired missiles at Israel. This uncertainty worries China, which is often linked to places like Iran. North Korea and Russia are part of what is sometimes called the axis of upheaval, or quadrant of chaos. They both feel strongly against the United States and sometimes work together on security issues. China has shown it is ready to defend Taiwan, but it doesn't want to start a straight war. China thinks these relationships can help it fight US power, but it doesn't want to take the risks that other countries in the group might in the Middle East. If there is an open war between Iran and Israel, China has no plans to get involved in complicated regional issues. China is probably going to stay out of the conflict in order to protect its own interests. To sum up, China and Iran have a strong historical and strategic relationship, and China's position in an increased Iran, there is still a lot of uncertainty about the Israel-Pakistan conflict. The relationship between Iran and China has grown through trade in oil, strategic investments, and shared geopolitical interests, especially through projects like China's Belt and Road Initiative. However, despite their alliance, China is careful not to provide overt military support or get too involved in Iran. Problems in Israel protecting China's economic interests in the region without hurting its global position is a top priority, especially as it tries to keep its relationships with other countries like the US and Saudi Arabia in check. In the end, China may choose a practical, non-interventionist approach that focuses on economic diplomacy and limited security cooperation to deal with the challenges of Middle Eastern instability. That's all for today's video. Thank you for watching, and if our content inspired or resonated with you, please show your support by liking it and subscribing to stay connected with our community.